In this episode, I'm answering questions from our Podcast Community Mastermind Facebook group. I will cover video recording hacks, guest strategies, and the secrets to smoothly transitioning from audio to video podcasting. Tune in.
This is the Podcast in the Rough. Tune in every Friday for new adventurous episodes.
Welcome back to another exciting episode of the Podcast in the Rough. I'm your host, Zebulon Thomas, and this is episode 139. Today, I'm answering questions that you, our amazing Podcast Community Mastermind Facebook group members, have sent in. So let's dive in. Question 1 from our Facebook group member asked, what are efficient ways to record and edit video for my YouTube channel while still supporting my podcast? This is a great question. Video content is king these days, so to efficiently record and edit videos, consider using free tools like OBS Studios or Shortcut for recording and editing. They offer robust features without breaking the bank. Additionally, create a consistent workflow for your podcast and video content. This will streamline the editing process and maintain a cohesive brand image. Question 2 from a Facebook group member asked, what's a good way to bring guests onto my podcast? Do I work out a deal, pay them, or promote them? Excellent question. Bringing guests onto your podcast can be a game changer. The trick is to create a win-win situation for everybody. Networking is key. Reach out to potential guests with a compelling pitch, highlight the mutual benefits, offer cross-promoting for their work, and consider creating affiliate deals if that's a route you want to take. It's all about building relationships in the podcast community. I highly recommend going back to episode 136, where I dive deeper into guest-related podcasts. And now let's transition to our next and final question. Our last question from a Facebook group member who is looking to transition from audio photo podcast to a video podcast in 2024. They're wondering about the easiest setup for remote recording, and they seek free customizable options. Also needs help with tools for creating properly sized, reusable frames for micro content. Thank you for this question. For remote recording, consider platforms like Zoom or StreamYard. They are user-friendly and provide great video quality. However, it's going to cost you a little bit. Now, if you're looking for a good video camera to record on the go, I have pulled off video podcasting just using my iPhone set to 4K when I was in a crunch back in the day. So I know it's possible, and you can totally do that. And I always say fail forward. But I do highly recommend getting something like a webcam, like a Logitech C922, and connect that to a laptop. So you're still minimizing what you travel with, but now you got your microphones, your mixers, you got a laptop, and then you got a webcam. And you're going to shoot this in a wide shot. And then in editing software, you're going to zoom in to individual areas of the frame. And this is why I recommend shooting in 4K so it doesn't distort the quality when you do a zoom in. You're not going to zoom intensely in, but zoom enough in. So you'll just have to play around with the positioning of your webcam and get that right distance of what really looks good for you. So you have a wide and a zoom in shot. And then you're going to have to sync up the audio later. So you got a little bit more workflow, a little more editing to do, but you can do it. It's totally doable. Now, if you do have a budget for this, I highly recommend just 2 camera setup and have them record independently and then sync all the audio later. But then again, you're getting into 2 separate cameras. They're going to have tripods and maybe some batteries. But it's still doable. It's still doable to do a remote podcast. But you want to make this simple as possible. Now, for your free and customizable options, I recommend DaVinci Resolve. It's an excellent video editing tool. As for creating reusable frames, Canva is your go-to tool. Now, I'm not a big fan of Canva because I'm a diehard Photoshop master. I've been doing it since I was like 16 years old. It's many, many years ago. And I love Photoshop. And you just can't get things done like you can in Photoshop in Canva. However, a lot of people use Canva, and I've seen it done even at the high companies, everybody using Canva. So Canva will get the job done. So definitely check out Canva. However, if you do have Photoshop, you can get my podcast audiogram frames by going to buymeacoffee.com/in-the-rough, and you can find that in the featured section. Now let's wrap up with a reminder. Before we end today's episode, I just want to leave you with these 2 micro ads. Before we end today's episode, I just want to play these 2 micro ads to show you how you can get more involved in the podcast and show your support, and also get involved in the free Podcast Community Mastermind Facebook group.
If you'd like to support this podcast, buy me a coffee by heading over to buymeacoffee.com/in-the-rough and become part of the adventure by showing your support and taking advantage of any one of our exciting membership tiers.
The Podcast in the Rough.
Okay, once again, if you would like to join me inside the Podcast Community Mastermind Facebook group, it is absolutely free. All you have to do is go to thepodcastintherough.com/learn. That is thepodcastintherough.com/learn and get inside the group and learn how to podcast from start to success. All right, if you're enjoying this podcast episode, I would love for you to give me a rating and review about this podcast by heading over to thepodcastintherough.com and scrolling to the bottom of the page and leaving us a review. Or if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please leave a star rating and a review. It would help us reach more people and get them to learn about the Podcast in the Rough. Thank you so much for your support. I appreciate it.
And that wraps up today's episode 139 of the Podcast in the Rough. I want to thank all of you for joining me in today's journey on this episode. It's been fun, and I loved answering questions from the Facebook group and questions in general. So if you're not part of the Facebook group yet and you're listening to this, you can always send in your question by going to thepodcastintherough.com, and there'll be an icon floating on the screen where you can submit your audio question. However, I'm really excited how the group has been growing, and I appreciate everybody's support in the group, and it's a lot of fun, because we're learning podcasting and it's a safe place for us to fail forward, and we're sharing ideas and we're just feeding this community. It's nice. And the fact that people get to open new doors and experience new things in 2024 using podcasting, and that's really what I created the group for. And it's been an incredible ride, and it's very important to me to keep growing that. And so I just want to be there for anyone who's trying to get into podcasting and avoid the pitfalls and have fun doing it, and also know exactly what equipment to get so they don't spend a lot of money like I have. And I just want to say thank you guys for supporting this podcast, even if it's just sharing it, tuning in. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you next week for another great episode. Take care. This is the Podcast in the Rough.